Hello, and welcome to another Parallel Project Training podcast. My name's Ruth Phillips, and I'm here with Paul Neighbour, and we're going to be talking to you about assurance today. And this is going to be linked to the APM PMQ syllabus for exams starting in 2024. So, Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm interested to talk to you about assurance. It's an interesting topic, and perhaps one that a lot of people feel that they're not too comfortable with.
It's more of a hidden art.
A hidden art, yes. So looking at the APM PMQ syllabus, we've just got the one learning outcome on assurance, and it's about knowing the purpose of assurance within a project, including awareness of scope, priorities and strategic aims of assurance activities. So maybe let's just go back to basics on this and first of all say, well, what actually is assurance within a project?
I think they explain it in the learning objective because it says understand assurance as an ability to provide confidence to the governance board that the project is on track to deliver the objectives.
Right.
So it's about the ability to provide confidence. It's not providing confidence.
That's an interesting distinction.
So governance is the mechanism that provides confidence to the project board that everything's on track. Assurance is making sure that the information that we use as part of the governance process is correct, accurate, valid, and is being done properly.
Yeah. Okay.
So when the governance board are making decisions, how do they know that the information that they're looking at in order to take those decisions is true, fair and accurate reflection of the project?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's then when that confidence will be derived from, because if they have that assurance that it is true, fair and accurate, they know that the decisions that they're making then are going to be based on that accuracy of information.
So I see it as a process that supports effective governance. It underpins your governance processes. So how can you convince me as a board member that all the information you're presenting is accurate, true and fair, and all the statements you're making, and also that you're following best practices of risk management and change control, and your stakeholder management is working well? It's closely linked to quality assurance.
I was just going to ask you about that because Lisa and I have recorded another podcast on quality and quality management, and quality assurance comes up as part of that. So people quite often get a bit confused between the two, but there is a relationship, isn't there?
Yeah, so quality assurance is about the quality of the product, the end product delivered to the customer, and the way that product is delivered from the customer's point of view. This is more about that internal confidence within the governing board.
Yeah.
So if you go to a quality assured organisation, that's all about delivering customer service, isn't it?
Yes.
The focus of quality management is to deliver customer service. The quality of assurance here is about informing the internal project board that the project is being managed properly. Very similar, but a bit more in-house.
Yes, similar, but a different focus. Okay. Great. So that's what assurance actually is. We're now asked to have an awareness of the scope of assurance activities. So what are the scope of assurance activities on our project?
So if you were doing an assurance review, you'd have to define what the scope of that audit was, for instance. So what we're going to look at in terms of the scope of assurance. So are we going to look at just the project controls information? Are we going to look at the risk management information? Are we going to look at contractors and suppliers as well? So in earned value, they have a thing called an assurance compliance review, and you have to define what the scope of that assurance is.
Yeah. What is to be assured?
What is to be assured, yes. Is it all the supply base as well? So when we say we're confident in all the data, what's the scope of that? In terms of priorities, when we're assuring the data that's being used to support the decision making taken by the project board, what's important to them? So are they mostly focused on the money? Are they mostly focused on the risk? So it's very similar to scope. What do we want confidence in? That we can deliver. And then the strategic aims will depend on your organisation's culture. So it's back to where we talked about project culture affecting what life cycle you might choose.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can imagine if you were working in social care and you had a project that to do with the data of children who are in care.
Yeah.
Then your priorities would be about data protection.
Yes, absolutely.
And how can we be sure that we've got robust processes for not leaking information? If you were working for Microsoft and you're developing new innovative products or OpenAI, it's a bit more Wild West. So we don't want assurance to be so over-dominating that it compromises our ability to innovate.
Yes, so we might do things in a very different way then because of those aims.
Yes, so the strategic aims of the organisation will affect the assurance activities that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Would this also link back into things like the risk appetite of an organisation as well?
Yeah, that's right. So the APM have given us a picture, haven't they, which you can see in the study guide. And they've drawn this Venn diagram on page 34 of the book. So what that says is that there's an overlap between assurance and governance, which we've already described. Yeah. So governance is a decision-making process. Assurance is the confidence that the decision data that you're presented with is correct. But clearly, when you're taking governance decisions, you need to understand what the risks are of the decisions you take. And so assurance gives you confidence that that risk analysis and that risk information that you have has been done properly and robustly and rigorously. Yeah. So that's how you get that overlap between governance, assurance and management.
Okay. So let's have a look at the assurance activities. And I know that APM has talked about 3 levels of assurance activities, or I know that you've called them 3 levels of defense. So what's that all about?
Yeah, so this is usually people who work in PMO have said to me actually that when we're doing assurance, we've got 3 levels of defense. What they mean, 3 levels of defending against poor quality information feeding into the governance system. Yeah. And the first level is the controls level. That controls level is basically, have we got processes and procedures for things like tracking change control? So at the controls level, in terms of scope, what are our management systems? What are they made up? What policies and procedures? What standards have been agreed? So all that will be in your PMP or your standard operating procedures for your PMO. And the priority really is to control and understand the risks and uncertainties that exist within our control system, making sure that we're following those organizational processes and procedures so people have been trained and people know how to do it. So this is the planner or the cost engineer or the risk analyst basically doing their work and keeping that up to date. Yeah. Checking that they're doing it right and they've been competent and capable to do that.
Yeah. So quite detailed focused, quite internal to the project.
Yeah, that's right. So a second line defense is how can we know the planner is using the right data, that the cost engineer is using the right data, people are following the change control process internally. So this is internal monitoring and checking and reviewing, often by the PMO, that those quality procedures are being confirmed. And that confirms that the risks to the project are being managed in an effective way. And it means that you've got a consistent and effective application of those processes within each individual project.
Yeah, that they're having the desired outcome. They're not just following the procedures, but they're the right procedures and they're doing what we want them to do.
Yeah, and when you're doing assurance, quite often you'll do what they call risk-based assurance, which is might be causing a bit of confusion here. So if you want to audit something, you can't audit everything. So what you will decide to do is you'll say, maybe we need to be really clear on the cost or the procurement process. Yeah. Or if it's in child protection, maybe we need to be clear on the data protection process we're following. Yeah. So you'll do risk-based assurance where you look at what you think the risks are on a particular project. Yeah. So usually that's done by the PMO. So that's separate from the day-to-day people who are doing the day-to-day record keeping.
Yeah. Okay. So they provide a little bit more of an objective and independent view on things.
Yeah. So the project manager might be standing up at the board meeting saying, this is the status of the project and I recommend that we do this. And the PMO manager might be there going, so yeah, I've checked those numbers. They tie up with what I expect. So that's compliance or second level defense. The third is where you get independent external audit. Okay. So usually from outside the project or outside the organization. So it can be a peer review. They will do an independent deep dive on the project control systems. So earned value has got a compliance review procedure in it. Yeah. So you'll trace through the data and check that it's all been done properly, or the National Audit Office will do a review. And that demonstrates unbiased and independently that the assurance processes are being followed for the organisation.
That's a much more strategic overview of assurance, rather the other two are a little bit more granular.
Yeah, we do all of this. So controls, we monitor people's performance on the homework week to week.
Yeah.
And we monitor the feedback forms from the delegates.
Yeah.
Compliance, so as a management team we do tracking of pass rates and looking at trends in feedback and that sort of thing. And then independently the APM come and do an annual audit where you have to submit all this information and they validate that you're still meeting the standards.
That much more independent view of things from an external body. Yeah, that's a really good example of that.
And so most organisations will do it. They probably just don't call it assurance,
I think that's possibly where some of the confusion around this as a topic or as an activity within the project comes about, because I think that lots of different groups do it in lots of different ways. We've talked about the PMO quite often. If you're on grant funded projects, you might have monitoring officers come in to do this. There might be internal audits, there might be scrutiny committees, there's all sorts of different terms for it. So I think it can be a little bit difficult sometimes to see how it applies in your own organisation. So one last thing I'd ask about is we've obviously got to plan these activities in to our project lifecycle, otherwise they won't happen. So how would we go about creating a plan for assurance activities?
I've seen some really good practices at the controls level, the sort of level 1, that's just going on day to day.
Yeah.
Routine, day to day delivery of the project in a systematic way.
Yeah. And a lot of that is pinned back to your PMP and making sure that you've got all of those structures in place and using good practice to do that.
Yeah. Level 2, the routine monitoring and checking, that's just part of the monthly reporting process in most organisations.
Yeah, or maybe pinned to decision gates.
Yeah, some organisations do that right before decision gates, so they'll do a pre-check before decision gates. I have seen this done where on an annual basis they have a programme of assurance reviews that the PMO will undertake. Then independent reviews. I did an audit department once. How weird is that?
Yeah.
and they reported to the audit committee in the organisation and they had an audit plan. So every year they agreed with the audit committee of the organisations. This is the main board audit committee.
Yeah.
What the audits were going to be for the year based on the risk-based assessment. So if there was change in the business, so if you had a major transformation program in the business, you're going to get audited a lot, aren't you? And I ran a transformation project once and we did get audited quite a lot. But if you're just doing a BAU project, there's such a thing, a project that like fairly similar and you do lots of them and they repeat, you're probably not going to be audited that much. I'm sure the NAO have a whole process to decide what they're going to audit. And that was discussed with the main board audit committee and agreed with them. And then they went round and audited people according to the plan.
That's very much risk-based as well. Big changes in an organisation, a big transformation project, then audit are going to want to be looking at that frequently. Something that's a little bit more repeatable, known entity, then probably less interest on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered off the learning outcome there, knowing the purpose of assurance within the project, understanding the scope of assurance activities, priorities, strategic aims, and looking at how assurance, risk and governance all work together and how we can plan these assurance activities into our project.
I think it's probably an area that people need to practice questions on. There's a few in the book, but I think it's an area that I would recommend practicing.
Yes.
It's really tricky to get your head around, isn't it? Once you get there, it's okay, but it just takes a while.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice to understand the angle of knowledge that the APM want to examine.
Brilliant.
Fantastic. Thanks ever so much, Paul.
Thank you, Ruth. Cheerio.
Thanks. Bye-bye.